What's going on, guys? This is going to be week 5, booming and busting running backs for fantasy football. The first running back that I'm going to say make sure you start him is going to be Austin Eckler. I say that for two reasons. One, because Denver has a horrible defense when it comes to guarding running backs. Regardless of Melvin Gordon's production, I think they're going to try to ease him back in. Especially against a bad running defense. But look for Austin Eckler to still be taking a majority of the carries. And then also the simple fact that Austin Eckler so far is on pace to have over 1,000 receiving yards as a running back. So, look for that kind of production from the running back position against Denver with, them having, a pretty decent passing defense. I think Philip Rivers is going to have a down game, but I still think a lot of targets are going to go to Austin Eckler out of the backfield. Another running back that I think is going to have another great game is Philip Lindsay. This is going to be a good running game. Philip Lindsay for the Denver Broncos against the Chargers. The Chargers so far also have an underperforming running defense, and Philip Lindsay is just starting to get into his own, finding his groove. Just like it took him a few weeks last year before he started, picking up the pace. Look for him to be an important part of the Denver Broncos offense again this week. Another running back, Mark Ingram against Pittsburgh. I was a little bit nervous about this one just because I feel like Pittsburgh is finally finding their old defensive identity that they used to have, with guys like TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick, really anchoring things down on the front and the back end. But Mark Ingram is still going to be getting a majority of the carries, a majority of the those short end targets, and I really think in goal to go situations, Mark Ingram is still their number one option. And then my last stardom running back is going to be Chris Carson. Chris Carson's going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who I think they're going to have a turnaround, defensive performance against Seattle. But I think it's going to start from the back end forward, meaning that I think it's going to be, Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters, the safeties, bringing it back. So look for a lot of short yardage situations for Chris Carson to be bursting through that Rams defense. I have two flexes this week where, if you have them in starting positions, I'd be a little bit more cautious about that. Maybe drop them down into a flex, put somebody else into a starting position. Number one is Aaron Jones. Dallas has not been great against the running back position so far. And they've played 3 really underwhelming offenses. And then, they played the Saints with Teddy Bridgewater, which hasn't really been that impressive either. But they're still giving up the 12th most points, fantasy points, to the running back position. So look for, in a game where it's going to be defensive time of possession and big plays are going to be really who decides the winner. Look for Aaron Jones to have a big game. Another one is Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette is coming off a 220-yard rushing performance. But every week before that, he's only had between 60 and 70 yards and a touchdown. So, if you think he's going to drop back to, his old production, against Carolina, I'd be a little bit skeptical about that because I think Carolina has a really underrated defense so far in the NFL. So look for Leonard Fournette to have maybe 45, 50 yards, potentially a touchdown on a lot of carries. So be careful about him. Another running back that I'm going to say sit is Alvin Kamara. With Todd Bowles in at defensive coordinator for Tampa Bay, they've really started to clamp down on opposing running backs. They're not giving up many points at all. They shut down Christian McCaffrey. They absolutely destroyed everything that the Rams were hoping to do with the running game, except for, single 1 yard situations where, Todd Gurley get a touchdown or something like that. But look for Alvin Kamara to be the focal point of their defensive efforts this week. Another sit running back is going to be Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb is going to be taken care of by a lot of San Francisco linebackers. I know he just had a 168 yard, 2 touchdown, 3 touchdown game, against the Baltimore Ravens. But I think the Baltimore Ravens were really out of their element. And I think that was more about Baltimore playing poorly than it was about Cleveland playing well. Again, San Francisco's had 2 weeks to prepare for this Cleveland game. They've been watching a lot of film. So look for Nick Chubb to get shut down. And then also James Conner against Baltimore. Last week on Monday, when Pittsburgh played Cincinnati, it looked like Cincinnati did everything that they could to just take away wide receivers Juju Smith-Schuster and James Washington. They just took those guys away and then allowed Mason Rudolph to beat them every other single way. I think between the two running backs combined on Pittsburgh, they had about 100 and like 160 yards receiving. So, be careful about that production. I think Baltimore is going to be a lot more careful about that. Baltimore really wants to get this leg up, back in the division. This is a divisional game. It's still important. Plus, right now, they're still tied for Cleveland, but they have, they lost the tiebreaker. So now they're really starting to try to get that, step back up in the division. So look for James Conner to be having an underperforming game this week.